There's a few things in this world that are constants. Water is wet, there are clouds in the sky, Vorsh is a pedophile, and the West is going to betray the Kurds the second they are no longer useful to them. And that last one there appears to be occurring again right now in Syria. A few days ago, HTS, a former Al-Qaeda affiliate, liberated a whole lot of Syria, including Aleppo and the capital Damascus. Whether I can remove the air quotes around that liberated or not still remains to be seen. And while Assad was bad, and this has the potential to be something good for the future, missing from Western reporting on this is the fact that, like most Syria rebel factions, HTS is Turkish-backed. And in the complete chaos of Assad's deposure, other rebel groups in the north of the country have taken advantage of the situation to start attacking the Syrian Democratic Forces, which is the armed military force of the Kurdish faction in what is commonly known as Rojava. And these forces who are attacking them are also, of course, Turkish-backed, which indicates at least some level of coordination and shared goal between them and the Islamist factions who have recently taken the south. And this does not bode well, as it indicates that there are ambitions among the rebel factions to sort of destroy this uneasy autonomy that the Kurds in the north had built for themselves over the last decade or so, and just take their territory right back and just make it a normal part of Syria, and who knows what they're actually going to do to the people who are there. So the Syrian Kurds have always been used as sort of a cudgel by the West, both Western governments and Western imperialist liberals in general, to sort of say, hey, look at these guys. These guys are good. Look at their ideology. It's agreeable. Look at their aims and goals. Those are agreeable too. They usually overstated those. We'll get to that in a second. And there's Assad, and, he's bad. You should support these guys, not those guys. Big issue with that sort of argument has always been the fact that Assad and the Kurds never really fought much, if at all. I'm not going to say they never fought at all, but I am pretty sure there has never been a serious military engagement between the SDF and Assad's government. I might be wrong on that. There might be one or two here or there, but the point that I'm making here is they didn't really have a significant conflict with one another. And it does not bode well that the second that Assad's government falls, the rebels, who are obviously, as I've been saying here, Turkish-backed, and obviously the Turks have a big issue with Kurds in general. So they are immediately attacking them, and they seem to not exactly be in favor of their aspirations of greater autonomy within Syria. So I'd just like to bring that up, something that has often been vastly misreported, obviously to the advantage of the Western media and Western imperialists in general, because they want to paint the Kurds as a lot more radical than they are, a lot more anti-Assad than they really were. But they were always the most sort of measured and least demanding faction, I would say, out of all the factions in this conflict. All that they really ever asked for was an autonomous region within Syria. They did not want independence. Or maybe they do want independence, but they knew that that was too much to ask for. But they wanted an autonomous region, like what Iraq has for Kurds, basically. You could probably get clued into this from the fact that their armed forces isn't called the Kurdish Independence Army or something. It's called Syrian Democratic Forces. They're not saying they're not Syrian. They're not saying they don't want to be part of Syria. Nonetheless, an autonomous Kurdish region, even if it would be agreeable to the rest of the Syrian population, which I don't actually know if that's true or not, but shouldn't matter because, I think the people who live there should get to decide their own fate, especially given that they are a historically oppressed minority that is obviously at further risk of being oppressed, given what Turkey is doing to them right now. That's not something that Turkey could abide by. Turkey hates Kurds, mostly because Turkey itself has a bunch of Kurds in it who have been fighting for their own autonomy/independence for a very long time. And this Turkish anti-Kurdish ideology gets to the point where a lot of Turkish nationalists argue that Kurds actually don't exist and they are mountain Turks, for example. So none of this is really surprising. It's not surprising that when you have a bunch of Turkish-backed groups in Syria, they're going to attack the Kurds. That's a given. Even if the people actually involved in these groups don't actually give much of a shit about the Kurds, they need to do it to appease their Turkish overlords. Because, the Turks are the ones who are funding them, they're the ones who are equipping them, and they also need them in the future to sort of help them out with propping up whatever the government is that they're going to form in Syria. So they seem to be happy to do the bidding of the Turks here. And the bidding of the Turks, the Kurds, is not a good thing. And unsurprisingly, it seems that the Kurds are being abandoned once again by the US, by their Western allies, which whoever saw that coming? I mean, the Kurds themselves probably saw it coming. I would hope they're prepared for it because it's happened so often at this point that they have to know that it's coming, right? If you didn't know, a big part of the US's operations against Iraq in the 70s, 80s, and 90s was to fund Kurdish separatists in Iraq who had no chance of achieving their political goals and egg them on to attack Saddam's troops, attack Saddam's positions and stuff, knowing fully well that they had absolutely no possible way of ever beating Saddam's then very formidable military, just because they wanted to use them to sort of sow chaos against the government who they did not approve of. And then when that resulted in backlash from Saddam, they did not do anything to stop it. Great example of this is the Gulf War. The US invades Iraq, and then once they had achieved their own goals in destroying Iraqi infrastructure, destroying the Iraqi military, they came to a peace deal with Saddam. And after that peace deal was signed, Saddam started massacring Kurds because he blamed them for sort of siding with the US, enabling this to happen. And the US military and US officials literally at some points watched the massacres and did nothing about them because ultimately they didn't care. What they cared was achieving their own goals and, drumming up dissent among the Kurds. As righteous as it might be, they nonetheless knew that it was absolutely hopeless that this disenfranchised, poor, under-equipped, untrained minority was not going to be able to fight the Iraqi army. They still egged them on into getting themselves killed anyway. And then once the Iraqis started massacring them, the US just watched on as it happened. Now, this time around, the Kurds in Syria are obviously a lot more equipped to defend themselves, but not against a nation-state actor like Turkey. They do not have that sort of support, and it seems like the US and the West is going to be withdrawing support from them because at the end of the day, what the US and the West was concerned with was getting rid of Assad and getting a government that they can work with more installed there, and that seems to have happened already. So what reason do they have to keep supporting the Kurds now, according to their own interests? None. So why would they? Good question. I don't think they're going to. So this does not bode well. And I wanted to make this video before anything happens. I mean, I hope it doesn't happen as I think it's going to, but I am pretty sure that what we're going to be getting here is attacks on Rojava and the sort of Kurdish autonomous region project there, coming from the rebel factions, with radio silence on this from the Western leaders who up until now has supported the Kurds just because they sort of saw them as a counterbalance to Assad, even though that view doesn't really make sense when you know the broader situation and that their demands were ultimately very moderate, give us an autonomous region. So yeah, I just sort of wanted to sound the alarm bells here by talking about this as the Kurdish factions, or faction, I guess, because it is mostly just one big united group. They have been the most agreeable, least bad guys in all of this, and they continue to be so, even though they have sort of worked with the US in an alliance of convenience. And all that I can say is that I hope that they were prepared for this, because they must have known it's going to happen. It's happened to Kurds all over the Middle East, dozens of times before, so surely they were ready for this. But the problem is, even if they're ready for it, they're going to be an independent force fighting against rebels who are now no longer rebels. They are now going to be governing Syria, while those guys are also supported by a major nation-state actor, Turkey, which also borders the Kurds. I don't think this could ever go well. I would hope that something is done to prevent what seems to be about to occur from occurring, but I mean, yeah, I don't have much hope. I guess it is just another example of Western hypocrisy and the cynical Western use of minorities in their target countries all around the world for their own imperial purposes, just to abandon them afterwards.